Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks. We'll bring this special regional council meeting to order of April 15th. Before we start, just like to recognize that this meeting is being held in the traditional territory of our friends, neighbors, and Treaty 8 partners of the Fort Nelson First Nation, as well as the Prophet River First Nation. We recognize our treaty. We recognize the rights within that treaty. And we also recognize and celebrate the contributions and enduring presence of the Métis people. Please be advised that tonight's meeting is available to the public, or this afternoon's meeting is available to the public to attend virtually and is being streamed and recorded. Have adoption of the agenda, please. Moved by Councillor Gerwing, second by Councillor Enex. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So that brings us straight to business arising outstanding items administrative report 1826, the 2026 government transfers applications for decision. Staff, please.
I'd like to start, and I'd like to basically do some set the scene for us before we get into discussing the individual applications. We need to recognize that this was our first year operating under the new policy. And as staff, we've identified that we had some issues in assisting the groups in getting their data being provided to align with the reporting and our submissions. So internally, we're looking at cleaning up that piece and making things like reporting forms the same as intake forms. We also recognize that we've got a few groups that have different year ends, and that in dealing with them, we'll be working through their agreements to identify stub periods so that funding will be allocated cleanly to up to a point of their year end, and then the remaining funding up to our year end, and we will deal with that in the background. And I guess the last point I just want to make before we walk into it is that we recognize that our relationship with all of our groups has changed through the process and will continue to change through the signed agreements that we're going to have with them and being able to closely work with them through the RDP department as well. So Shayna has produced the list. We've had some questions in the background, I think that have been answered. And basically, we're looking for council's direction on how you'd like to walk through the list.
Well, that's a really good point, because we certainly have folks that who have on our council who have shown that and declared conflicts in the past with respect to different portions of these. And I think the way we've handled it is individually and has given them the chance to declare the conflict and step out rather than being in conflict with the entire document. So that, I think that gives everybody a greater opportunity to participate in a greater portion of the discussion. So I just throw that out there, and I'm interested if council feels the same way.
Yep, that works for me. But I would like to talk about the two groups that are not eligible because they are on this list. And so I don't know if that's now or when you want to do that. Just wondering why they're on the list without mention that they're ineligible at this point in time.
Seeing it was our first run through the process and the policy, we wanted transparency in terms of all of the applications that came forward. So regardless of whether or not they met all of the qualification, whether they met the sharing ratio, we wanted council to be aware of them, and up to council if they choose to consider something that doesn't meet the funding sharing scenario, because we're over the $15,000. We don't have a set ratio for the amount of funding we're asking the groups to provide. So we know that it differs. In the amounts under $15,000, we've identified what we need that group to come forward with in terms of their contribution. So those, we may at some point in the future have a request for that an organization isn't able to provide us what we look at as a significant amount of their share. So they are on the list. We're not looking for approval for them. We want to be very transparent about the groups that applied this year.
Then I guess I should mention too, so there's two that according to our policy are ineligible and then one that's incomplete. Okay, thanks.
And if I may add, the incomplete application is applying in the next intake. No, sorry, that's.
The Fort Nelson Search and Rescue is not going to submit for the April 30th deadline. They are planning on submitting in the future.
Yeah.
Okay. So not necessarily the next intake, a future intake. Okay, is there anybody else who has any comments, questions? And I guess we'll just move through them one at a time. So the first one will be the Fort Nelson Public Library Association.
Undeclare a conflict on the library.
Okay. We'll come and get you when we're done. Okay, floor is open. How would we like to proceed? Just a general just a general overview from staff, and then council can provide their comments. Is that fine?
Shana, did you want to do the overviews or? I can. Yeah, all right.
Feel free to chime in.
Basically, so we have the first application is from the Fort Nelson Public Library Association. Their request is for operating funding. They have identified that their grant request is $362,703, and they are requesting 84.09% of their total operating costs.
Okay. Council thoughts?
No, I would just point out that this is the same amount that they got last year. So just to make that point.
Okay. Is there anybody who feels that we don't want to approve this? Any comments? Okay. We move on to the Phoenix Theater Management Society then.
Do we, I just ask a point of order. Do we want resolutions for each one?
Oh,
Please.
Yeah. So
okay, sounds good.
I would make the motion to accept the Fort Nelson Public Library Association's request in the amount of $362,703.
Thank you. Moved by Deputy Mayor Gerwig.
Second.
Second by Councillor Roper. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Are there any opposed? That carries. Okay, the Phoenix Theater Management Society.
Mayor Fraser, I'm going to declare a conflict. I have a contract with the society, so
Thank you.
I'll let Kyle know. On my way.
Thank you.
And the next request is from the Phoenix Theater Management Society. They've identified they're looking for an operating grant. The grant is in the amount of $193,250, which represents 52.8% of their operating budgeted operating costs for the year.
Are there any questions? Comments? What would council like to do? Do I move her for the to accept the grant? Moved by Counselor Enox to accept the grant for the Phoenix Theater Management Society for $193,250. Is that what you're moving?
No.
Oh,
Okay, my paper says 167. I'm looking at something wrong.
Oh, look on this sheet, Brenda.
Oh, the 167 is the next one for Historical Society. Yeah,
Yes, that is the correct.
moved by Counselor Enox. Do I have a seconder? Counselor Andrews, thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Good. The next application on the list is the Fort Nelson Historical Society.
so we have two requests from the Historical Society. The first request is for 167,400 on for an operating grant, 64% of their operations. And then the second request included is for a capital grant. And it is a total capital grant of 20,500, and that represents 75% of the request. I also need to add that we have a requirement for accountant reviewed financial statements, and the society has indicated that their request did not include the amount to cover that. Budget-wise, we have set aside a pocket of money that we will be utilizing. So I just want to disclose that in addition to this amount, we will be flowing additional funding to the Historical Society for their financial statement requirements that we anticipate will flow into their funding request for 2027.
Go ahead.
Do we have a rough estimate on what that?
$10,000.
And have we put that aside for others as well?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we've set aside an envelope to cover those costs as we recognize that it was a new requirement and the applications may not all have included.
So as the policy expects that will be done, then funds will flow to them in order to have that done.
That's right.
Okay, so that'll be operational this year. And then the expectation is that
It would roll
It
into
would
their request.
roll
for-
into the request for future years.
That's right. And just for clarification, as we go through all of the agreements with the organizations, we will ensure that that requirement is covered off. So if there's an approval here based on the request and it doesn't include funds for those statements, we will work with each group as we do the agreement.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just a point of clarification, I know not all of the groups currently get an accountant approved financial report, but some do.
Yes.
And that's already been included in their funding. So I just want to make sure that we're not doing it twice.
No, not at all. And we recognize based on their submission, whether or not their financial statements are accountant reviewed statements based on the financial statements they've already provided to us.
Right, thanks.
Councilor Roper?
So these are just accountant reviewed. This isn't a full like financial audit?
Not a full financial audit. They need to be reviewed. The statements need to be reviewed by an accountant. They may be, I'm familiar with notice to reader engagement or an audit based on what the organizations are looking for. But we decided that we couldn't pin the organizations into one type of accountant reviewed financial statement. When we're looking at the groups with smaller funding pots, we recognize that the work to get it done and the type of statement doesn't need to be an audit.
But based on the amount of money that a particular organization is asking for, there could be a requirement for a full audit. That's part of the policy.
There is no requirement for an audit.
We retain the right to request.
Right.
Yes,
That's what I'm saying.
that's right. Yeah.
And so will that be identified as part of the funding agreement, right? Because there's a funding agreement that goes. between the-
Absolutely.
So that will be identified in this particular year's funding agreement. If
Mhm.
there's concerns in the future, then the next funding agreement could include an audit then.
Yes.
Okay, good. I think that's fair.
Can I ask a follow-up, please?
Sure.
So we're setting aside $10,000 for each society or altogether for all of,
No, we've set, I believe it's $50,000 or $60,000 that I've set aside so that we have the ability to work with the different groups. Because the requirement for an organization such as the Historical Society will require more accountant time to prepare the statements versus a smaller organization that perhaps is seasonal, that has a more limited amount and doesn't turn as much cash over, for instance.
are we conducting that work separately, or are we asking the societies to deal with
This-
that on their budgets? And we provide
The
that?
societies will be responsible for providing their information that is in an accountant reviewed financial statement.
Okay, so we're asking each one to do it individually.
Yes,
Would there be
Yes.
any synergies to us having a program where all of them are reviewed by, let's say, the same group or the same accountant? Would that be beneficial as opposed to kind of piecemealing it, or?
I
I just see that 50,000 as just a substantial amount, and I've looked into full financial audits before, like for our nonprofit, and that was looking at about $6,000 or $7,000, and
Mhm.
to hear $10,000 for just an accountant review, it just seems like it's a little bit more than I expected.
The information that we have is that the cost can be anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 for that work. For the Northern Rockies to secure a professional to do the work for all of the organizations, I think would step across the boundary of the organizations being independent.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Just having done a lot of consultations with the different groups, there was some resistance maybe because they wanted the autonomy to do it in the way that works best for them. Some organizations are already doing it, and so we wouldn't pay again because we've already funded and have funded it for many, many years for some organizations. So that's what we heard, that's what we reported back to staff, and I think that's why the decision was made, because we did make it as the council for this, for our policy development, right? So just to give the groups the autonomy to do it in a way that works best for them.
With a audit group that might know them already.
Yeah.
Fully familiar with their operation.
Yeah, that they're already working with
Yeah.
it for sure.
Yeah.
I wonder what the cost difference is between, let's say, an accountant review and a full financial audit, because I know that there's benefits to having that financial audit for, let's say, other grant organizations that require it. And I wonder if it's very close, would the full financial audit be a better option than, say, the accountant review, as far as the society being able to use that to their benefit? Maybe.
So basically, the cost for an accountant to provide a set of financial statements determines on the records provided. If the organization brings their records in a shoebox, still in the original envelopes, which in my past life I got to deal with, the cost, it generates the cost, right? If you've got an organization that already is running a great set of books, it's about putting them into a format, ensuring that they're recognized as being reviewed by the accountant. And it can cost less than that shoebox full of records for a smaller organization. So it's really hard to try to determine what that cost would be.
Or the cost benefit analysis for the particular organization. Different funding groups will ask for different level of financial reviews, right? And so if you've got a lot of funding groups that are asking for audits, then the audit makes sense. Otherwise, maybe not so much.
Right on. Well, that clears things up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we went down a little bit of a hole there with respect to this one, but it was a good conversation that needed to be had. It was just the first group. It was the first group that was brought up where we need to talk about it. So we're in the Historical Society. We have two separate funding requests, one for operations, one for capital. So I'll accept a resolution for each one, please.
I'll make a motion that we approve the Fort Nelson Historical Society grant request, one in the amount of $167,400 for operating. Additionally, for capital, $20,500.
Okay, moved by Deputy Mayor Gruing that Fort Nelson's Historical Society application be approved in the amount of $167,400 for operating and $20,500 for capital. Second by Councillor Edax. Is there any discussion? I was looking for a separate, but you join them together, so I'm going to be okay.
I'm nothing but efficient.
Yeah,
Mayor.
nothing but efficient. See that? Because there may be some who wish to vote for one and against the other, but anyways, go ahead.
I just how council feels about the capital portion of it. Like I'd see part of that is to move a building, which would help with potential revenues. The other part is an accessibility thing that there's a lot of grants opportunities for those, and I'm sure they've looked for them as well, but is that something that we want to, as a municipality, be paying for at the moment? That was just.
And my concern with capital always has been is that I don't think the taxpayer should be paying for exhibits, but this year's capital is not exhibits. We're moving one, and then the other is improvement to the building. So it's not like we're buying the cars. I had an issue with when we bought the cars, but in this particular year, I'm okay with the capital that's there. But yeah, go ahead.
And I do appreciate you bringing that up because there is more work to do, I feel, for the next council in looking at how and why the whole capital requests are, right? It's like, and then what responsibility do we hold? What responsibility does the organization hold? So, but we just didn't get there in this year's revamp of the policy, but hopefully the next council will look at that.
Right. Okay, are there any other comments or questions? All in favor of the motion? Are there any opposed? That carries. Okay, the next application is the Northern Rockies Child Development Association, looking for operating.
I'll let Shane speak to this one.
Yeah, so as you've noted, this is one of the applications that was deemed ineligible due to the fact that the funding they were requesting was not supplemental or incremental. It was, as you can see, 100% of their request. I did connect with the applicant, the executive director of the organization, several times. Had a meeting with her at the center to fully understand their request. In addition to the not meeting the threshold for supplementary funding, there was a few other criteria that they did not satisfy in terms of information provided. We were also made aware of additional information in terms that impacted their request. They were looking for funding to support families in accessing autism diagnoses. And they were forthcoming in that they have received information on a partnership with Northern Health to provide some funding for that. So I did provide a lot of information, a lot of emails, a lot of meetings, but they in the end decided that they did not want to submit their revised application.
Okay. Councilor Over.
I think maybe one of the reasons we decided to revamp this program into the government transfers was to see what the nonprofits could come up with to better the community. And even though this isn't eligible, I'm interested in what they're trying to do here. And I'm wondering if we can reconcile the ineligibility towards the benefit that this would have for the community and families and children. I see it as a worthwhile cause. So I'm interested in hearing everyone's thoughts. I think it's a good cause.
They have. So,
Yes, Jimmy.
they have secured alternate funding. We have worked together with another funding organization and Northern Health to bring a qualified evaluator into the community that is going to be testing up to 12 children. So I think that, yeah, we were able to secure a way around that.
Counselor Anders, please.
So with that information, I'm wondering why they wouldn't resubmit their application with that, because then that would take a lot of that criteria and make it eligible. So I'm curious as to why they felt not to resubmit it with the new info.
That information was not provided.
That makes me pause, right? Because I'm in agreement. Like what they're trying to do is definitely something that our community can benefit from, and I would very much like to support it. We've have some parameters we're supposed to be following, and then now knowing that they hit more of our parameters but didn't want to resubmit, that just makes me pause.
I think because they were missing other ones. So
And it wasn't like staff didn't go back to them. You know, Shana went back to them and had a discussion with them.
and I met with them as well.
Okay, so how does staff envision we deal with these ones that we deem ineligible? Put them on the floor and defeat them, or just not put them on the floor? They've actually pulled the application? Did they remove their application?
After the initial meeting and these reports were,
Oh, so they actually pulled the application. Okay, so that's. Okay. I wish I'd known at the start. I skipped over that one.
I think the discussion though reflects, as Councillor Roper indicated, the intent. And now we have the ability for staff to work with different groups. And part of the policy, we want to be able to find partnerships for groups that perhaps we can't come to the table for. And in future, they would have the opportunity to come back and resubmit or to another intake. And we can have that discussion at that point again.
I just like to respond.
Okay. Go ahead.
And this is a Northern Health's responsibility to provide these testing opportunities for our children. And they haven't done that in a lot of years. So, yeah, I think we just need to be careful in what we are, where we're putting our money as well, right? Not that it isn't a worthwhile cause, but if we can, as we have been doing, lobbying Northern Health and through the BC Rural Health Network and the provincial government to do what they're supposed to be doing, there's great value in that as well.
I can, to speak to that, I think that's the case, but there are some projects that are just so important to the municipality and the province is not coming through for whatever reason that we just may want to take them on. And, historically, basically somebody would just come to council and sit in front of us and say, we have this project, we like it. And we had no place to deal with it. This is the place to deal with it now. So it gives us that opportunity. And now there's more awareness out there in the municipality about this. So, yeah, so I'm glad that we're moving forward. All right, so we will skip that one then. And we will go to the Northern Rockies Senior Society.
So historically, the Northern Rockies Senior Society has received a $15,000 grant for operation of their busing transportation. Our communication with them for this process was that they asked for the same amount of money each year. other than the year that they were attempting to expand the service. So what they've provided us is a request for operating, a grant amount, 50,801.16, which represents almost 34% of the operations. So the discussions that we've had with the group is that they're recognizing that the vehicle costs for the aging vehicles is increasing their ask, and that they took a look at their whole operation to determine, based on our information for an
Criteria.
operational grant, whether there were other categories that fit within it. Their request certainly is a lot more than the 15,000 that we have historically provided.
Thank you. Comments from council? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I had a lot of questions around this one just because the numbers that were included in the application, I couldn't make sense of them when I was looking at well, they didn't do a budget, but the other financial information that they included. So I have had a back and forth with Tony, and she has been able to answer, and hence she's gone to the organization, or somebody has. And so they have been able to answer and alleviate my concerns around the questions that I had. But I do have one other point.
Okay.
Is that just to make the point that it's my understanding that the Senior Society has provided notice that they're not going to operate the bus in 2027 unless they get further support from somewhere. Like, I think I read that.
Funding for buses.
Yeah, funding for the bus. So I just want to make sure that if the bus ceases in 2026, because that's what we're funding, if that service ends, that we would be looking at refunding some of those dollars. Because it's my understanding that this, which has led to my confusion to begin with, that it's only the transportation project through NRSS that we are funding. So if that project ends before 2026 is over, that just somewhere somebody should be looking at recouping some of those costs if possible.
So that could go into the funding agreement, could it not? Yeah.
Absolutely. So as I said, as we went through with each of the organizations, this is an organization that operates a few different streams in their operations. So this is one where we would certainly look at having a repayment of surplus clause within the agreement, where others, it may be that the surplus rolls into a future year, right? So this would be, I would be recommending that this would be one that would be a self-contained return surplus at end of program. So that would cover that.
That would indeed, but just to add to that, it's like if it ceases mid-2026 and all of the resources are gone, and that's why they've had to cease operation, then we need to have some sort of a plan for that too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So they'll need to know that they can't wait till it's all gone before they pull the pin on it.
Thank you. Yeah.
And if I may, we can incorporate that into the funding schedule. So that it's not an upfront funding, and we can develop that relationship.
Okay. Council's wishes.
I'd like to move that we support the Northern Rockies Senior Society request of $50,801.16.
Thank you. For operations.
For operations, correct.
Moved by Councilor Andrews. Do I have a seconder? Second, Councilor Roper. Thank you very much. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes. Okay, that takes us to Fort Nelson Search and Rescue. I think we just need to have a discussion about maybe the process, since how they are showing incomplete, but I think maybe a discussion around that would be good.
Yeah, so this was just a case of the applicant not being able to gather the sufficient documents. He had several communications with both Tony and I and felt that it was not in his best interest to apply at this time.
Okay. And well, I guess because they made an initial application, that's why they're here. I don't know if in the future we would need to put we would need to put them on to these in these intakes that we're talking about. No.
No, if we have an incomplete application, we would be dealing with that
As staff,
as staff.
right?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't even need to come forward in the report. I'm sorry, you had your light on before. and I-
That's fine. No, all I was gonna add is when a policy is developed, one of the things that occurs either shortly after or through a process like this is the process, right? And that's the piece that we're starting to piece together now,
Yeah.
quite frankly, is the policy is fairly, I mean, you would adjust the policy as you go forward, but the procedure or the process now is the next step. And these are some questions that, because in some cases we need council's guidance, right? Like if it's ineligible, do you want to see it? Do you want to acknowledge, do you want it on the report or not? I mean, and those things that we just need to build into the policy, or sorry, the process, including things like how we deal with different ideas or thoughts on how we deal with funding, if funding potentially could be exhausted, if it's spread out over the year in terms of the release of funds versus upfront. Those are all things that now we start chipping away and or picking away at the procedure, and in some cases come back to council to possibly get some direction to make sure that council's in favor of that versus staff just assuming or guessing, right? One of them, of course, would be, do we present the information anyway or do you just, if it's ineligible, we just advise that we had 8 applications, 2 didn't meet the eligibility requirements. No,
I think that's worthy of having a discussion unto itself about the policy,
absolutely.
right? Because there's lots of nuances around.
That's the piece.
Do we want to know that they're either incomplete or ineligible,
Yes.
right?
And
Staff
why?
might deem them ineligible, but we may want, somebody on council may want to take it forward. So I think that's a policy debate we need to have about.
That's my
the
point,
policy.
yeah.
That's some other time.
And that's the
Yeah.
piece, yeah, like, that's the whole intent, because right now we're in the side of caution, showing everything and having that conversation, so council is aware of what we've received, but we might elect in the future to provide different direction.
Okay. Good. Okay, so with that in mind, then I will put Northern Rockies Arts Council on the floor.
Yeah, so similar to the previous ineligible application, we just wanted to include this for transparency. I had several conversations with the applicant. The issue here again being that the total grant requested was 99.5%. They've indicated that they have quite a lot of opportunities in terms of event funding, but not operating budget. So I've met with the applicant to explore other areas. They've communicated that really their issue is capacity in finding grants and applying for grants, which is quite common and fair. And part of my role is not only the government transfers program, but accessing external funding. So I've made a commitment to work with her to explore opportunities.
So they're ineligible based on the fact that we don't do sole source funding. Okay, good. Any comments with respect to that? Okay, then we'll move on to the Fort Nelson Community Literacy Society.
I'm going to declare a conflict. I have a family member that is employed there. So.
Okay. Okay.
So the Literacy Society is requesting a grant of $20,824 at this point, which represents a 5% contribution. 2025 was the first year that 2024, we provided the operating grant. I thought we provided one 2025 as well.
It was for 2025, I think.
It was for 2025, right? So just for some clarification, when this group came to us in 2024 for 2025, they indicated that there was loss of funding or loss of funders. So one of the questions that had been raised was that they've indicated that should their funding year is June 1st to May 31st 1st, 2026-27. And if in that year they lose a funder that they've budgeted for, their intent would be to utilize their reserves and surpluses to get them through that phase. We haven't had discussions with them about what would happen if they lost a permanent funder. But they have indicated at this point, the program they're presenting is budgeted to be funded other than the 20,000 they're requesting from us.
Go ahead.
So I struggle with this one a little bit. Just when you look at their financial statements, they have a very healthy reserve amount. And some of it is for certain items, but not all of it. So I'm just struggling a little bit, and they offer valuable service. I have a very long relationship with them. They did lose a major funder the year before. And like any organization, you make those adjustments based on how much funding you have. They came to us last year as a one-time $30,000 request because, you know, that funder gave them no notice. It was like March, and you learn in April you're not getting a sizable portion. And that had been a solid funder for 10 years. So you're not really anticipating a large loss like that. And so Council of the Day felt that it was important to help that organization weather that funding loss. But now I believe it's like an ongoing, this is how much we're short. And so that's what as I understand it, that's the application that we see before us today. And yeah.
So I think that's what this policy is for, is to help cover shortfalls that some of our nonprofits might have. I hear your comment with respect to the reserves being well, you might say fat padded or, you know, but they're healthy. Healthy is maybe the better word. But I also hear the reason for it is because they're 6 months out of sync with everybody else with respect to the way they operate. And so they may need healthy reserves to cover off a year if they ended up with more than just the one funder that pulls out. So I'm pretty comfortable with that. I think they provide a good service in the municipality. I think that we help them kick off with the newsletter that they do weekly, and I think it works. So I can support them. Councillor Schultz?
Do we know whether or not the reserves within their system are growing every year? Like the reserve funds are growing every year?
That is a good question.
Like this represents about, what is it, 4%?
Yeah.
But it's,
Yeah.
if that 4% is just to keep the reserve funds growing, then is that what we want?
It's certainly something we can be paying attention to next year for sure. If we see the reserves growing by more than 5%, then that's something that we would.
I see it doesn't have that big of an impact right now, but it could that's a good point to watch it.
Yeah. Okay.
I can comment on the information that they provided for 2023 and 2024, and their internally restricted reserves, which relate to their commitment to their grant programs, did increase by $29,000. Their externally restricted funds decreased by $27,000. So they have, if I can find the note, many organizations in their funding agreements are restricted by their funding agreements based on the types of services that they're providing. And I can't find that information right now. Just 1 second. So there is, currently they have reserve funds of 312,469. 143,222 is externally restricted by funders. So those funds are tied to specific programs and are spent within those grant requirements. The remainder of that, 155,000, is internally restricted. They had a fallback plan in the 25-26 budget year to utilize $75,000 if required, if they lost funders. They did not have to use that. So they've identified that they do have that pocket of $155,000 to offset costs should they be operating.
Ask a
The
question.
relevance of the question though is whether that 155 increases year over year. And I think that's the number you'd watch for.
It decreased.
Yeah.
It decreased.
Yeah.
They had a, they
Can I
had a
just get
deficit.
clarification on something
Yes.
Tony just said. So, what I understood you to say is that they had put aside $75,000 to be used.
No, they had indicated
Okay,
that
indicated.
of the
Okay.
amount in
Okay.
reserve, they may need to use $75,000 in the current year that we're in if their funding agreements didn't plan.
So,
out.
but this was the current year that they said they needed help from the municipality and we contributed $30,000.
So when I
Right.
talk about current year, I'm talking about June 1st, 2025 to May 31st, 2026. So they came to us in the fall of 2024, which they basically were looking for help in that 24-25 year. In their 25-26 year, they identified that they would be able to utilize
Up to 75.
internally restricted, that they potentially had the risk of not getting funding of $75,000. Then their last indication is that should they not receive funding as they budget, they do have 155,000 in reserves that they have the ability to basically phase out that program. Is our understanding.
Okay.
If,
I followed it.
so if
I'm
I,
glad you followed it.
if,
Followed it.
Yeah,
So-
everybody else, well, 'cause
so-
I still think that
yeah,
they didn't use the $75,000 that they had set aside
Haven't yet.
because we gave them the $30,000 in the year, the operating year.
we gave them $30,000 in their 2024-25 year. So they applied within their 24-25 year and we flowed it to them in their 24-25 year.
The fiscal year ending May 31st, 2025.
That's right.
They got
That's
the
right.
money before that.
Now, if we can step 1 year ahead, right? When we're sitting around the table, some of us are sitting around the table, next year having this discussion, we're dealing with the reports that have come in and the agreement that they have signed and whether or what's going to happen with a surplus of our funds that hasn't been utilized and whether or not they're utilizing their surpluses within those programs. So this is another organization that, they're operating multiple levels of funding pots.
Well, I feel better, with Counselor Sol's question about for any organization, not just this organization. So talking in general is that we are going to be looking at if reserves are building, then that becomes just part of the review and part of the information that's presented to council so that they understand that whole fulsome picture.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would just add one thing to that too, and that I think when I think in terms of reserves, uh, their whole reserve fund or accessible non-restricted reserve fund of 150 grand is still only about a third of their operating budget for 1 year, with the multiple layers of funders from elsewhere is irrelevant to that. It's just their reserves are a healthy. I don't think that they're way overboard with the amount of reserves is what I'm saying for that level of expenditures overall.
So this is another policy discussion moving forward, right? Is what's acceptable to the council with respect to, because we expect that they will build some level of reserves, right? And so if you've funded them some money and in their budget, they've put away that they're gonna put away these reserves, that all has to be acceptable to the council of the day through policy, right? That, because otherwise, if you say, well, we can't give you $20,000 because you always have 150, then how do they ever recoup unless there's an acceptable process for putting away to reserves? So that's another policy discussion that we need to have as a group as part of this to refine this policy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because putting reserve funds away is good financial planning,
Yes.
quite frankly.
Yeah.
But to like even
As long as-
Sol's point is the value of that reserve fund based on their operations and the need that helps determine then what the value really needs to be from a mitigating risk, right? Which we
Yeah.
do a lot with our own internal reserve contribution. So, but it needs to be part of the discussion and the review.
Yeah, so that's kind of away from this and, Councilor Roper didn't get an opportunity to hear that, but what would we like to do with the Literacy Society?
Okay, I'll make a motion that council award the Fort Nelson Community Literacy Society operating money in the amount of $20,824.
Thank you. Moved by Deputy Mayor Goering, second by Councilor Andrews. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. The next application comes from the Toad River Area Club. And at this point, I think it's appropriate for us to go in camera and deal with the legal advice that we got with respect to the Toad River Fire School, because it may have some bearing on their application. Okay, so can I have a motion to move in camera, please? Moved by Councilor Enoch, second by Councilor Andrews. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll go in camera then. Ready? Thank you, everybody. We have finished the special in-camera portion of the meeting. There's nothing to rise and report. So we're back into the special regional council meeting agenda where we are about to deal with the Toad River Area Club application for a government transfer. So I'll turn it over to staff, please.
All right, the track group has provided a request for $25,000 for a capital request to support a spend of $25,000. The grant request is $17,500, making up 70% of the total amount of capital being requested.
Okay, so there has been a request from the Toad River Area Club with respect to some training.
Yes,
And so
Yeah.
the amount is,
so
can somebody remind me what the amount was?
19,310.
Thank you. Can we add that to this?
we certainly can. Just a note, it's not capital, it will be identified as an event grant.
So 19,300 and
The total has to be 36,810.
okay. What would council like to do? Move by Deputy Mayor Gerling, please.
Yeah, I would make a motion that council approves the Toad River Area Club request one for capital in the amount of $17,500. Request two for an event in the amount of $19,310 for a total of $36,810.
Thank you. Moved by Deputy Mayor Goering, second by Councillor Edick. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you, that passes.
One thing council may want to consider is where the funds come from for that second request. I know there was some discussion that council had that might suggest it doesn't come out of the government transfers.
Sure.
Thank you. I further move.
Well,
No.
yeah,
Want it different?
another motion. Just-
Okay, yeah, I further move that the amount of $19,310 comes from the wildfire resiliency
Mitigation.
remediation fund.
Special project.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Gerwig, seconded by Councillor Roper. Is there any discussion with respect to that? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Staff, please. We're through the list, but I'm not sure if we're done. So I'll turn it back
Thank-
over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we are through the list. I just want to make council aware that we will make a reduction in the proposed 2026 budget related to the three organizations that were on the list that did not receive funding approval to date. And we'll update that information in the budget coming forward to you on February 20th.
Right.
Oh,
This-
heavens.
It looks like he.
My apologies. I was still hoping for budget approval in February, but that's okay. Yes, on April 20th.
Okay, I hate to throw a wrench into things here, but so is the amount in the budget that's set aside for future intakes, knowing that you've got ineligible and or out, incomplete applications, does it need to be adjusted for that? Or are we comfortable it still will cover?
At this point, I'm comfortable that we have a sufficient budget to allow for future intakes based on the knowledge that we have. We also have included in there we must include the amount for our fee waivers. Anything related to government transfer makes up that total.
Good. Okay, thank you. You have a comment? Yes, please.
Yeah, I just want to express my gratitude to the staff. This has been a unique process, and I think that with all the bumps along the road, we still came out with an equitable access to funding available through the municipality. And I appreciate everybody's hard work, and especially to Tony and Shayna for answering multiple questions that I had. I know that it must have taken considerable time out of your days, and I really appreciate that. It made my decision-making process so much easier for me, so thank you very much.
Stole my thunder. I also wanted to thank staff. Are you running for mayor in the fall? Is that why you're stealing? I also wanted to thank staff. It's, again, we knew that we weren't going to get it 100% right out of the gate, that this is an iterative process, and we've already identified some policy discussions that we need to have to help clarify it. We didn't know how this meeting would go with respect to the structure of it. I think we've got a little better idea how that will happen in the future. And so, so my thanks to everybody. I know it's something that's been on several councils' agendas to try to get done, and to try to make that grants to community groups policy more encompassing, but yet still fair and affordable. So I think we've achieved those things. We're not complete, But I think the more we do it, the better we'll get at it. So thank you, everybody, for all the work that you put into it. Is there anybody else that has anything on this? Then we are adjourned. Thank you very much for everybody's time.